Hi everyone, welcome back. In today's video, I thought we'd take a look at Dragon Quest and how it is represented on the Nintendo Switch. Now, Dragon Quest is a famous series of Japanese RPG or role-playing games, which started back in 1986, the year I was born, actually. And the series is very famous as being something of a kind of alternative or rival to Final Fantasy. And Final Fantasy was developed and at the time created by Squaresoft, with the designer Hironobu Sakaguchi was the man who created the series. Whereas Dragon Quest was created by Yuji Horii, and also was developed by the company Enix. Many people will refer to the company today as the two have merged to become what many people call Square-Enix. But in Japan, in Japanese, the correct pronunciation is actually Enix. So at the moment, I would say that Dragon Quest is probably the most successful and popular in the West than that it ever has been. Now, as I mentioned, the series originally began back in 1986 on the original Famicom, the first Nintendo console. And the first 4 games in the Dragon Quest series were released on the Famicom. 5, then 6 were both released on Super Famicom, and then eventually number 7 was released on the PlayStation. And actually, none of these games were ever released in the UK until later on. The first Dragon Quest game to be released in the UK, the first main Dragon Quest game, was actually number 8, which was released on the PS2. And the series had somewhat of a history in other, say in North America, where it had been released under the name Dragon Warrior, but from part 8 onwards, the series has been referred to both in Japan and elsewhere as Dragon Quest. So since part 8 was released in the UK, we have received both re-releases of some of the early games in the series, such as 4, 5, and 6, which were released on the DS. 7 was released on the 3DS, and also a port of 8, also on the 3DS. Part 9 was released on the DS, and although Part 10 has not so far been released outside of Japan, the most recent game, number 11, has been released on the PlayStation 4 and also on the Nintendo Switch in the UK. Now, interestingly, Part 11 has also been released on the 3DS in Japan, but in the West, we have only received the home system versions of that game. And in addition to the mainline Dragon Quest, the games on the Nintendo Switch, Part 11, we have also received, for example, the first 3 games have been ported over. There has been a HD 2D remake of Part 3, which has just been released. We have also received, for example, the Builders games. There's been the Monsters game, and I feel that the Dragon Quest series really is at the current peak of its popularity worldwide. Now, what I wanted to showcase today was not so much the Dragon Quest games for the Nintendo Switch, but actually a unique Dragon Quest themed console, which was released exclusively in Japan, which includes unique Joy-Cons, and also the console itself. The back of the console has a nice Dragon Quest themed design. It also includes a Dragon Quest dock, and also in addition to that, there has also been a Switch controller, which is actually designed to resemble the slime character from the series. And this is a fully functioning controller, which you hold actually upside down because of the shape of the slime. And it includes, all the buttons, analog sticks, and full functionality. And it can be used with Dragon Quest. Well, it can be used pretty much, with any game that you want to play on the Switch. And so I thought that since I have managed to buy these items from Japan, that I would just let you take a look at them because, as I said, they're exclusive to Japan, haven't been released in this part of the world. Um, Although, having said that, since the Switch console and the accessories are all region free, it's possible for you to buy the console if you want, and you can play games released in PAL areas on that console. You can perhaps buy just the controller, and that can be used on your console that you bought here, and so on. So there really is no barrier to using these accessories and controllers. It's just really a case of finding them. And so, without any further ado, let's take a look at some of the unique Japan exclusive Dragon Quest themed controllers for the Nintendo Switch. So, this is the console itself. Now, when this was released, the redesigned OLED Switch had not yet been released, and so this console is only available with the standard version of the Nintendo Switch with a slightly smaller screen and the larger border around it. So as you can see here, it comes with two Joy-Cons as usual, but rather than the two Joy-Cons being different colored as they would be on the standard, the sort of bright blue, neon blue, and the red on the other side, both sides have this same nice dark blue color, and you can also see on both of them that they both show the slime character. The one on the right is probably the standard design of the slime, which is very famous, whereas the other one has this slightly different variation of the character. Turning over to the back of the console, and you can see here that on the, well, as you're looking at it here would be on the left, but on the right Joy-Con, it has this sword, which is used in the latest installment in the series, in Dragon Quest XI. And then on the Joy-Con, on the left Joy-Con, it includes the shield, which is also from this game. And you can see here on the back of the console itself, it becomes more clear depending on what way you tilt the light, but you have five of the slime characters in blue, and then also a number of other characters from the Dragon Quest series in general. And all of these characters were designed by the famous artist Akira Toriyama, who recently passed away. And I think many people are a big fan of his work on the Dragon Quest series. He also worked on Dragon Ball and on games such as Chrono Trigger, famously, also games such as Tobal number 1 and 2. And so it's nice here to see some of his artwork showcased on the back of this console. Just on that note, I'm interested to see what Dragon Quest will feel like with the next game in the series, as I heard that although number 12 has been announced, that nothing has been shown so far. But I'm curious because prior to Akira Toriyama, also the series composer Koichi Sugiyama died a while ago. And so of the three men who were there at the start when the series began, only the series kind of creator, Yuji Horii, is still with us. And so I'm interested to see what the series is like continuing forward. And I do hope that the series retains its unique identity. And I know that fans, I will miss, as a fan, I'll miss the the composer of this amazing music that he made for the Dragon Quest series, and also the beautiful artwork created by Toriyama-san. I have heard that with number 12, they were talking about maybe the series being a little bit more mature. I'm not too sure, but I do hope that I do think that the series, has a very unique look and identity and feel, and in some ways, Dragon Quest just has that charm. I feel like, even though we're now into, I suppose, with playing on PS4, and Switch would have been like the eighth generation of consoles, and I suppose any future installment will be on the new console following the Switch, as well as, I suppose, maybe PS5. But although the series has progressed, and obviously the graphics are now look great, I do like that the series still kind of feels like an old retro RPG from the days of the Nintendo Famicom, the NES, that 8-bit era. As I think I like when games improve in terms of their mechanics and visual style. But I also think that it's nice to retain some of what we love about the classic games that we grew up with and have many fond memories of and nostalgia regarding. And I think it's interesting that, as almost like sort of two series from the same, well, now company, Square-Enix, that although the Squaresoft um, flagship game, Final Fantasy, seems to become more different as the series goes on and moves more and more further from the traditional turn-based style of gameplay, becoming more, real-time action these days. Dragon Quest on the Enix side actually seems to continue to fly the flag for old, traditional, retro, turn-based Japanese RPGs. One thing I thought was a brilliant idea in Dragon Quest XI was the function to switch between a 3D art style or to play the game from a 2D top-down perspective, like the classic games that we remember from the 8 and 16-bit generations. Just one thing when I think about Dragon Quest on Switch that I'm not sure why is that the series, the first trilogy of games are available to play on the Switch, both in the initial ports and recently now they are receiving this HD remake treatment. But the last ports of 4, 5, and then part 6 are actually back on the DS. So I think it's nice that, or it would be nice, would be great if they were to port those games over to the Switch so that we can, I can enjoy playing those games on a modern console and also on a big screen. Because aside from the DS versions, which are only portable games, it's actually not possible to play those games in English on a home console at all. Also the same, with Dragon Quest 7 and 8, both on 3DS. I do think it would be nice if they would give us a version of those on the Switch as well, so that similarly we can play those on the big screen. And the same for 9, which so far has only been on DS. And just one thing I think that is on many minds has been that Dragon Quest X has so far not been released anywhere outside of Japan so far. Now, I know that initially Dragon Quest X was an online game, but quite recently there is a version of Dragon Quest X released for the Switch, which can be played completely offline. It's not a multiplayer game at all. So I would like if that was to be released in the West, as it would allow me to play the one game in the series, which until now, with online requirements, I wasn't able to, as I don't play online games for the most part. I do own the this new version of Dragon Quest X on the Switch, which I bought from Japan. And so I would like in a new video to showcase that, as I got the special edition of that, which comes in a nice box and includes some nice art and accessories. So just before I move on to the slime controller, I'm just going to show you just the box of the console itself here, which features prominently some of Akira Toriyama-san's artwork, which, you know, it's instantly recognizable. And, you know, whether it's characters such as the cast of Chrono Trigger or the various hero characters in Dragon Quest, the slime character, or his manga characters such as Goku, or something maybe more obscure such as Dr. Slump. I think really overall, as soon as you see a Toriyama design, you immediately recognize his unique style, which has made him, you know, a popular fan favorite to many, many people. This is the Dragon Quest slime controller, and as you can see, it's quite big. It's also a little heavier than the standard Pro controller, not by much. Now, I would say holding this, it is fairly comfortable. Obviously, with the shape of the controller, you have to hold it upside down, as all of the buttons and D-pad, sticks, and so on are all positioned on the bottom or on the back of the slime itself. Now, when you're holding this controller, I would say that when you're reaching up with your fingers to the shoulder buttons, they do feel further away than on the standard controller. But in general, all of the buttons and sticks and so on all feel good, I would say. Now, this controller is made by the company Horii, who are no relation to Yuji Horii, the Dragon Quest creator. But Horii are known for making these controllers as accessories for the Switch. They have released a Joy-Con which has a D-pad on it rather than the 4 buttons which come on the standard D-pad, and their accessories are all, you know, licensed by Nintendo themselves. So as you can see here, it has the official logo of the Switch console on it. But yeah, I mean, the buttons all feel nice. Probably the main difference, I would say, between these specific buttons and those on the official Switch Pro controller would be that, well, regarding the sticks feel a little more smooth than on the standard controller. Also, a number of these buttons seem to be rubber, rather than plastic, which is specific the plus and minus buttons, as well as the home share buttons. Those are all rubber, unlike on the official controller, where they're all made of the same plastic as uh, every button on that controller. But on this controller, the both the D-pad and the A, B, X, and Y buttons are all made of plastic and feel quite similar to the ones on the standard controller. Really, I suppose the only other difference or addition on this controller is that it includes this turbo function, which is something that I think you saw quite often on controllers back in the days, like the N64. I remember that being on some controllers, but it's not something that I see often these days. But yeah, I mean, overall, this is, I suppose, an interesting controller. Um, yeah, it feels nice to hold. It works well, and I think that the look is great. If you like this character, I think it is a really cool controller to have. Um, I know that this style of controller, this slime design, is also available on PlayStation. Um, but whether you want the Switch version or the PlayStation version, in any case, you will have to look to Japan for this one, as it has not been released in the West, and I don't think that's going to change. Also, this controller is quite pricey, so just something to think about. I got mine for around, I would say, £100, but you can find this for around 250, 270, maybe even 300 online. So just be aware of that. And also, when I was in Japan just a few months ago, I've traveled around quite extensively in Japan, and I do look at game shops when I'm there. And in Japan, this isn't something that I see very often. So just be aware that if, rather than buying online, you want to look for this when you're in Japan, that in my experience, you'll have to look high and low to find it, and it won't be cheap when you do. Just one thing I wanted to mention and show some photos of at the end is that actually this summer, when I was in Japan, I actually went to Tokyo Game Show for the first time. That was the first time for me to attend a video game conference in Japan. And also, it was the largest TGS in the event history. I think over the course of 4 days, there was something like 200 and something thousand people attended. And on the day I went, it was extremely busy. I think on that day alone, there were about 90,000 people there. And actually, last year, I went to Paris Games Week, which was the first time for me to attend a video game conference. And I would say that the Tokyo event seemed much busier than the Paris one. The Paris event was well attended. It's just the Japan event was extremely busy. And why I mentioned this is when I was there, actually, the Dragon Quest creator, Yuji Horii, was there in person um, because they were promoting the remake of Dragon Quest III, which has now been released. At the time, it was still in development, and so Horii-san was there on stage to, you know, speak to the fans in person. Um, and so, yeah, it was amazing to be able to see such a important person in game history and something of a household name in Japan um, there on stage. So yeah, that was very interesting. Just adding to that, although it's not related specific to Dragon Quest, but actually when I was there, I also saw Hideo Kojima-san, the famous Konami developer, who created, of course, Metal Gear and some maybe smaller franchises such as Snatcher, Police Notes, and Zone of the Enders. I also saw uh, two men who are part of Silent Hill and its development. So the first of these was Masahiro Ito, who is the art designer for Silent Hill for the series, and also Akira Yamaoka, who is the composer for the series. They were both there in person, so it was interesting to see those two as well. And in addition to them, there was also the Square developer Yoshi P, who is the creative director on Final Fantasy 14 and also 16. So I would say that the event, Tokyo Game Show, was packed with people attending and with developers that you could meet, you could see on stage, and you could hear talk about their work. And although this event in particular was in Tokyo, when I was in Paris and at the event there, I actually saw Yoshinori Kitase, who is one of the main men on who works on the Final Fantasy series, going back to Final Fantasy VII. He was there at the event in Paris to promote the release of Rebirth, which the event was last year, and the game has since been released this year. So while I saw some Japanese developers at an event in Tokyo, I do think it is possible to meet some of your favorite developers at events in other parts of the world. And so I suppose just to finish, just to think back on what I said, that I saw Horii-san, the creator of Dragon Quest, recently on stage. And although I wasn't able, of course, to see Koichi Sugiyama, the composer of the Dragon Quest music, or Akira Toriyama, the artist for the series, I'll always have their work to remember and enjoy and appreciate, both in the games themselves and also with unique consoles, controllers, and accessories which celebrate that, like these. Well, that's it for this one. So thank you, everyone, if you've watched this far. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you have, then consider giving me a like, leave a comment, and hit subscribe if you'd like to see future videos from me. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one. So God bless. Take care.